Can you guys hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Glenn.
Thanks, Vicky. You tell me when you're ready on the technical end of things.
Okay, I'm ready.
Okay. First housekeeping, I'm assuming I am running the meeting because Scott is not present tonight. Is that still accurate?
That is accurate.
All right. All righty, I will, it is 6:31. I will go ahead and call us to order for Hubbard Planning Commission for our November 15th meeting. If you would all join me in flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thanks for everybody being here, for joining us. If other board members have got a chance or commissioners have got a chance to look over the minutes, I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the October 18th meeting.
Motion to approve.
And I'll second that motion.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? The ayes have it, motion carries. The next item on our agenda is public hearing for land use DR 2022-2. Can I go ahead and begin that public hearing with the reading of that, Vicky?
I'm sorry, Glenn, I have Bill on the line. I didn't hear what you said.
Oh, sorry. Can I go ahead and open that? Are we ready with applicants and everybody else? But I can go ahead and open that meeting. I'm seeing a yes from Holly, so I will go ahead with my script then.
Okay, thanks.
All right, thank you. Good evening. My name is Glenn Holum. I'm the Vice Chair of the Hubbard Planning Commission. I will be presiding over this hearing. This is the time and place set forth for the public hearing in the matter of site development review, file number DR 2022-02 for 2363 and 2347 Industrial Avenue, Hubbard. The hearing is now open. It is 6:33. Oregon land use law requires several items to be read into the record at the beginning of every public meeting. The city planner will review this material. Your patience is appreciated as she goes through these next statements.
Thank you, Commissioner. Can you hear me okay?
Absolutely.
Great. The applicable substantive criteria upon which this case will be decided are found in the Hubbard Development Code, sections 2.107, the industrial zone, section 2.200, general development standards, section 3.105, site development review, and section 2.210, riparian corridors. All testimony and evidence received during this public hearing must be directed toward these approval criteria or to such other rule, law, regulation, or policy which you believe to apply to this case. An issue which may be the basis for an appeal to the City Council or the Land Use Board of Appeals shall be raised not later than the close of the record at or following the final evidentiary hearing on this case. Such issues shall be raised with and accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford this body and the parties to this hearing an adequate opportunity to respond to each issue. This public hearing will proceed with the staff report and any other comments from governmental agencies in attendance, followed by the applicant and all those who are in support of the application. All those opposed to the application will then be allowed to speak, followed by those with general comments who are neither for nor against the application. Finally, the applicant will be entitled to a rebuttal period. Please state your name, physical address, and mailing address clearly for the record before your comments. Please try to avoid repetition if someone else has already expressed the same thoughts. It's perfectly all right to state that you agree with the statements of that previous speaker. Please be assured that everyone will have an opportunity to speak. If you have documents, maps, or letters that you wish to have considered by this body, they must be formally placed in the record of this proceeding. To do that, either before or after you speak, please submit the material to Vicki Nogle, who will make sure that your evidence is properly taken care of. Prior to the conclusion of the first hearing on a land use application, any participant may request an opportunity to present additional evidence or testimony. If such a request is made, it will be up to this body to determine if the hearing will be continued to a time and date certain, or if the record will be kept open for the submission of additional evidence.
Yes, it'd help if I was unmuted. One point of order before I proceed. Okay, I was just going to ask if I have Phil, but my screen just populated with Phil there because Vicki, you'd mentioned that. So I will continue. With that out of the way, I need to ask the audience and fellow commissioners to a few questions. Does any member of the audience have an objection to the notice that was published? Does any member of the audience wish to challenge the jurisdiction of the Planning Commission to hear this matter? Does any member of the Planning Commission wish to declare a potential or actual conflict of interest or bias? Does any member of the Planning Commission wish to report any site visits or ex parte contact? And lastly, does any member of the audience wish to challenge the impartiality or ex parte disclosures of any member of the Planning Commission? I'm not seeing anybody jumping in there. So City Planner Holly Byram, please, if you would give the staff report now, that'd be great.
All right. For the record, my name is Holly Byram and I work for the Mid-Willamette Valley Council of Governments. My role is to serve as the contract city planner for the city of Hubbard and a few other great cities in the Mid-Willamette Valley. So this public hearing is for a site development review. This is filed 2022-02. The applicant is Amerio Design, and I see that we do have Jennifer Arnold on the line here, and so you will hear from her a little bit later. The location of the property, so this is two properties that are abutting, and they are located in the Hubbard Industrial Park. One of the properties is fully developed with a front office and warehouse building, as well as a rear warehouse building, paved parking, landscaping, and so on. And then the second property is vacant. And so this application regards both of those properties used together in one development. And the proposed land use is an electrical supply warehousing and distribution company. And they would occupy both of those lots. As we know, the site development review is a type 2 application. That means that the Planning Commission expected to make the final decision this evening unless there's a continuation request. I've included a staff report to the Planning Commission. On page 2 of the staff report, I've included a screenshot of the zone map just as a vicinity map, but I want to call out a typo here. I screenshot the newest version of the zone map, but kept an old key. So you'll notice that the industrial and industrial commercial zones, the keys are actually flipped there. We know the Hubbard Industrial Park is zoned industrial, and we know that this portion of Southern 99E is zoned industrial commercial. So I apologize for that typo on that key. You'll see the two properties indicated there. I've included a couple screenshots just from Google Street View, just as a reminder to refresh our memories which properties we're talking about here. And I think the aerial is really helpful at the top of page 3. So you'll see that the property address is 2347 is undeveloped, vacant, to field, and then the abutting property is fully developed. So these properties are both in common ownership, and they would both be used to support the same company here. At the bottom of page 3 is a site plan. No changes are proposed for the developed property. What is proposed for the undeveloped property is to construct or develop a gravel outdoor storage yard. And so this storage yard would be in support of that electrical distribution company. They would store equipment, vehicles, supplies there in that gravel yard. There would be access both from the abutting property and then a new 25-foot wide driveway from Industrial Avenue. Along the frontage, they would pave a new sidewalk to connect on both sides to abutting sidewalks. They would have frontage landscaping, fully fenced yard. And then there would be a stormwater swale running along the west side of the property there. Some of you may remember when we reviewed a site development review a couple years ago for the property at the corner of Industrial and 99. There is a drainage ditch here. It is included on the city's natural resource inventory. And so it is assigned as like a stream corridor. Most of the year, it probably doesn't look much like a stream, but because of that, the applicant is required to keep that 50-foot buffer from that stream from top of bank. And so on the site plan there, you'll see that they've labeled that 50-foot buffer, and then they have that drainage swale that goes back into a basin. And then that basin releases the stormwater at pre-development conditions. So the development criteria that the Planning Commission needs to consider starts at the top of page 4. And these come from the site development review section of the Hubbard Development Code. I'll summarize these briefly, and if I skip over anything or if you have questions, please do let me know here. As I stated previously, this property is zoned industrial. It is generally consistent with the industrial district and the abutting properties there, which are developed in industrial use. Properties along the 99E corridor to the west are zoned for industrial commercial uses, so you'll see more commercial components on that side over there. There are a couple non-conforming residences in this area as well. The proposal is to meet the 10% minimum landscaping standard. They have proposed a chain link fence around the full perimeter of the gravel yard with privacy slats along the front. Staff is recommending additional screening because an outdoor storage yard does trigger screening. So it's a recommended condition of approval for additional screening of that yard. Criteria B is about drainage and erosion control needs. The graveling of this yard, it's about 40,000 square feet plus, does require stormwater retention, and we did address that. The city engineer has reviewed their preliminary drainage report and has included some comments there. No concerns with that. C is about public health factors. Typically, that's public connections to water and sewer. There are no new utility connections proposed for that gravel storage yard. There are existing connections on the developed lot and nothing new proposed there either. D is about traffic safety, internal circulation, and parking. The developed lot has 2 existing curb cuts, 2 driveways there, and the outdoor storage yard, the new gravel yard, is proposed to have 1 new 25-foot wide driveway. No additional right-of-way is required to be dedicated there. They have sufficient width on Industrial Avenue. There was no concerns about access spacing of those driveways. There's sufficient room between them. One note, they are proposing to concrete the driveway apron only on that gravel yard, and staff has included a recommended condition of approval that they pave that driveway. The Planning Commission will remember that all parking, maneuvering, and loading areas are required to be paved, except for special approvals where the Planning Commission may approve a gravel storage yard abutting a paved parking lot. So in this case, the applicant is requesting Planning Commission approval to have that gravel storage yard, but staff does need them to go ahead and pave the driveway so that that gravel can go ahead and drop before it enters the Industrial Avenue right-of-way. So here in the staff report body, The initial thought was just the first 20 feet of that driveway to get you back past that landscaping buffer along the front. The city engineer's recommendation is actually for 30 to 40 feet of paved driveway, just to make sure that gravel drops out. In terms of parking, the developed lot has an existing parking lot right up front there. Based upon the company's expectations of employees not being more than maybe a dozen or so in the first few years, there's no pressure on that front parking lot. I mean, there's plenty of parking for their business model here. So no additional parking is really recommended by staff. The development code doesn't assign a parking ratio for the outdoor storage area, but there doesn't seem to be demand for additional parking here. Let's see, it is important to note that if that gravel storage yard were sold off, any new business or owner that comes would need to come into the city for additional land use review to use that gravel storage yard. The only reason that storage yard is allowed to continue in gravel is because it is abutting the paved lot on the existing developed property. So if that changes hands in the future, they'll need to come back for additional approvals before being used. The existing buildings have loading docks and loading ramps there. No concern there. Bicycle parking, 4 total spaces are proposed, but 6 are required. So they need to add a couple more bike parking spaces there. The code requires that at least half of those are covered. So that's included as a condition of approval. The next criterion E is about adequate noise and visual buffering from non-compatible uses. And this is the section that talks about how outdoor storage areas are required to be screened. And that screening can be done with fencing, with privacy slats, or it can be done with walls, berms, or landscaping. So just as a reminder, the applicant is proposing to have privacy slats in the chain link fence up front along Industrial Avenue. And then on the rear of that gravel yard, they have a row of arborvitae proposed. Along the west side, they're proposing to keep the native vegetation there, although staff's concern is that there's not a lot of height there. And so there may not actually be much screening from that native vegetation. Maybe the applicant can talk about what's actually there and how much screening it provides. Let's see. So this, there's an image on page 9, and this is a diagram that the applicant provided to staff, and it details the areas of outdoor storage on both lots. And I really would look to the Planning Commission in terms of how much of that outdoor storage they want to see screened. Staff's recommendation is definitely along at least the western boundary of the gravel yard, and then potentially the northern boundary of the developed lot, because there's a non-conforming residence there. Those would be the primary concerns. At the bottom of page 9, criterion F talks about natural features on site. And so this is where we look to that drainage and what kind of riparian corridor rules the city has. That drainage is part of what's labeled as Little Bear Creek. In the city's inventory, it was considered an intermittent stream. The state wetlands inventory classifies it as a perennial. So whatever it is, we know that there's a 50-foot buffer from top of bank there. And then I've included screenshots from both of those surveys on page 10. So one thing that the applicant asked early in the process was whether or not they could have their stormwater facility in that riparian buffer. And the Hubbard Development Code does allow for that as long as the applicant coordinates with the state on any applicable permits that might be required to do so. So there's a condition of approval for that. Criterion G is at the top of page 11, and that is about internal circulation on the site. Even though that building was developed, there was no safe pedestrian connection to the front of that building. And so staff has recommended, and the applicant is showing a pedestrian walkway to connect the public sidewalk to the front of the building, so that pedestrians are not sharing those driveways with large vehicles. And then criterion H is the last one there, and that's about potential hazard areas. And typically what we talk about in this section is just the unpredictability of Hubbard's percolation and just drainage with stormwater. And so the applicant has addressed that. Starting on page 11 is the staff recommendation to approve this site development review. And there's a list of recommended conditions. Most of them are pretty standard that you've seen before. I will note that D is about the riparian permits, and that is the applicant's obligation to coordinate with DSL and others who might need to be consulted on those. E is about future use of that gravel storage yard, requiring additional land use approval if it changes hands. F is about paving the driveway. City engineer's recommendation was 30 to 40 feet back, just to ensure the gravel's dropped before they enter the right of way. The city engineer did need some additional details on the basin design, and so that condition G. H is about screening to install privacy slats in the fencing or plant native vegetation along the outdoor storage areas. We can discuss further the priority areas if we'd like to. Let's see, just to increase those bicycle parking spaces and ensuring that the parking that's provided, paved and striped, is used for vehicle parking and not storage there out front of the building. Standard language about lighting, fencing, and signage. They've actually already submitted a sign application. On page 13 of the staff report, I've included the Planning Commission options. The recommendation is A. And then attached to the staff report, Exhibit A, are the combined responses from the request for comments. I see that we have both Public Works, and it looks like the fire department's on today as well. So if we have questions for them, they can answer those questions. And then Exhibit B is the application package. So I'm happy to take questions, or we can go straight to the applicant's comments.
Does anybody have questions right now? Otherwise, we can leave a placeholder in case we need to go back to you for questions. Otherwise, I'll proceed on with testimony then. Sound okay? Perfect. I will now accept public testimony regarding this case. Would the applicant or their representative want to speak on their behalf?
Yes, thank you.
You bet.
So I'm Jennifer Arnold with Amerio Design. I'm the land use planner at Amerio. I also have my client Liam on the call as well, just to answer any questions that may be very business specific that I can't answer. Holly did a great job of describing the project, the property, existing features, and what we've proposed. We don't take any exception to the proposed conditions. We agree with the recommendation for approval, and we support the conditions of approval that are recommended. The paving of the driveway and the additional landscaping buffer seems a pretty standard practice in Oregon from my experience. So we're not objecting to either of those conditions either. Existing landscape along that western property line near the drainage consists of some mostly blackberries and some minor trees, like the very small diameter trees. but they're mostly up at the front of the property. So if a condition of approval were to be made for additional landscaping along that riparian area, we're open to that. However, we do ask that it's not excessive because plants are expensive. And we do want to have a minimum impact to that riparian area as well. We'd like to clean it up and make it a great environment for the users of that riparian area, but we would like to keep a lot of the human interaction away from it. So I'm here to answer any questions you might have. It's a pretty simple project. We'd just like to take what's currently a field and make it into a gravel storage area and help expand the existing business that's currently in operation.
Questions from any of the commissioners of the applicant? Must be pretty straightforward. I'm not seeing anybody jump in there. Alrighty, well, thank you for providing that. We will move on then. Actually, I had one question. So the staff recommendation was for west side and the northern boundary. Can you clarify what both of those would entail?
Is that question for me or for staff?
No, that would be for you. Holly had mentioned about having you clarify exactly what kind of what your plan was for both those property sides or property line sides.
So arborvitae is the main plant screening we're proposing. We're sticking with a chain link fence with slats in it. So there's an additional layer of privacy and screening from adjacent users. And then storage, as far as what's being stored is what's currently kind of stored behind the existing building on the adjacent property.
Okay. All right, I will move along then. Is there anyone who would like to speak in support of the application? Hearing none, I will move along. Is there anyone who would like to speak in opposition to the application? Is there anyone who would like to speak neither for nor against the application? Would the Planning Commission like the applicant to address any of the testimony, which there wasn't any other additional testimony? Are there any other questions of clarification though before we kick it back to ourselves and come to a decision?
Chair, I wonder if either Public Works or the Fire Department have any additional comments.
Sure, I can entertain that, absolutely.
This is Michael with Hubbard Fire District. I don't have any questions or concerns regarding this project.
Yeah, this is Mike Krebs, Public Works Superintendent, and I don't have any comments to make at this point either.
Thank you.
One quick question for Michael. Is there a need for a Knox box in case there's an incident within a locked storage yard? Or is that not a
Yes and no. Because the current existing facility, I don't remember which lot number that is, they have Knox already installed on site. They could put keys to the yard in that Knox box, and we can make a note of it in our pre-incident plans that that's where the key is located. If a new company came in and took over the lot, say that they were sold separately, then we would at that time require the new business to put a Knox lock on the gate. Does that answer your question?
Perfect, thanks. Is the applicant willing to add an additional key there to that yard?
Yes. Excuse me, yes.
Great. Thank you, Michael.
Any other clarifications, questions? Before I close or continue the public hearing, is there any additional questions commissioners have of staff or anyone? As a reminder, once the hearing is closed, commissioners or staff may only speak. Hearing none, public testimony is now over. I will close the public hearing at 7 p.m. And we'll entertain a discussion, either discussion or a motion on the matter before us.
I move to approve the application.
I'll second that.
I have a motion and a second. Just a clarifier. So that is as presented with just those couple notations that we just verbally noted. Does that
Yes.
cover? Does that work, Vicky?
It works for me as long as Holly's good with that or wants to be more specific.
To confirm the commissioner's motion, that's as submitted, adopting the findings and recommended conditions contained in the staff report.
That is exactly correct.
Beautiful, thank you.
Awesome. Any discussion on the motion before us? I will just restate, this is having to do with DR 2022-02. So that's part of the record. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed? That motion carries. And I would thank everybody for their being here tonight and dealing with that business, and good luck on the expansion of your business there. So
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Yeah, thank you.
with that, if there's no other business to come before us, if somebody would like to offer a motion to adjourn,
I'll offer a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting.
Second.
have a motion and a second. Hearing no discussion, all those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed? We are adjourned at 7:03. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
everyone.